calls growing to cut off federal funds going to sanctuary cities after Kate Steinle's senseless murder by an illegal suspect in San Francisco. Now a House committee just adopting a plan to make it happen. And Gary B., you say it needs to happen to keep all of us safe.
Yeah, absolutely, Brenda. Look, I'm all in favor of cities, local jurisdictions doing their own thing. I think that's what makes America great, when it's states' rights as opposed to the federal government. But in this case, I think it's wrong for these cities to do that. So I think the best solution is, look, fine, you want to do that, then you're not getting federal funding. And I think that's the clearest way to do it. And then we'll see how strong cities like San Francisco are in harboring these dangerous criminals.
But, Jonas, this is a pretty slippery slope, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's also this attitude that's like a welfare town, San Francisco. Like, let me just back up. Like, the biggest in history, Mark Zuckerberg lives there and paid $2 billion to the federal government. Like, they can have their own money. They can kind of run their crazy utopia that they want. We don't have a lot of say in it. It's not Mississippi. But yeah, it is a slippery slope, because if Democrats were in charge, they would start saying, well, let's cut off federal funding to South Carolina, because you can just walk in and buy a gun and look and you can shoot people. It's just people are dying because of the crazy gun laws. Like, when does it stop? You can't, if it's really not a whole federal issue where it's like race or something they really like to step in. And I'm not a big states' right person, but like, look, I went through Georgia with a friend that got a speeding ticket. They have a crazy super speeder law. If you're going like over 50 miles, they start giving you $600 tickets. I think their federal funding should be cut off. I think that's ridiculous. They're just shaking money out from people in Connecticut. But you know what? That's not really the scope of the federal government to punish states for their own little way of doing things.
John?
Well, there's a complete difference in laws that are silly, that you think are silly, and you just don't agree with, and the fact that local communities are sanctuaries where they're subverting federal law. Look, this Juan Lopez Sanchez had been deported 5 times. The feds had asked specifically, if he gets out, we need to know about it. San Francisco specifically does not comply with the federal regulations, and because of that, criminals are what's going to sanctuary cities like this. I don't think they deserve federal funds. We're not talking about illegals here who came here for a better life. We're talking about the criminals that are drawn to sanctuaries, because Juan Lopez Sanchez said that was the reason that he went to San Francisco.
Yes, he was a multiple felon as well. Chuck, what do you think of this? Full federal funding?
I think that the cities are trying to put a Band-Aid on a chest wound. I mean, they're trying to fix something because the federal government won't stand up and do anything. As this criminal had came across the border 5 times, we passed a nonpartisan bill in the Senate that would have doubled security on the border to make sure this did not happen. Do you agree or disagree with the sanctuary cities? These people are trying to deal with an immigration problem at the local level, and the system is not perfect, and you get criminals like this who do horrible things. They should be punished to every extent of the law, but we should fix the overall problem, and you'll fix criminals like this coming the border.
But Lisa, right now, should taxpayers be footing the bill for this?
No, they shouldn't. And look, this horrific tragedy really underscores the lawlessness that we've seen in this country when it comes to our immigration policies. And look, Congress controls the purse, and they absolutely should cut off funding from cities who are not complying with their immigration officials. And look, it's important to remember that this is not an isolated incident. We've had over 8,000 illegal immigrants who are either have facing charges, who have been charged, who have been released in the last 8 months alone in sanctuary cities.
It sort of is isolated because statistically, as I mentioned on the show a few weeks ago, and the Wall Street Journal said this week, illegal immigrants are less likely to do crime than Americans. It's kind of like when the British don't like the Australians because they say they're all criminals. It's really not true, and it's based on racism, essentially. Statistically, they don't do these crimes as much as Americans do.
No, what it's called is someone illegally being here who should not be in this country, who has committed multiple crimes, who's been deported 5 times, who was able to kill someone because they were here.
They're very likely to do it, and this isn't just a one-off event.
I stated that there's been 8,000 illegal immigrants that have been released in the past 8 months, which is a fact.
Okay,
which is a fact.
I get my facts from the Wall Street Journal, not from Rob.
Okay, Gary B.
Well, look, I come back to John's point. The cities are doing something illegal. I'm not in favor of the federal government making these overreaching laws, but if they decided in Georgia, you couldn't arrest people for going 51 miles an hour, then that's the law. Then Georgia doesn't have the right to do it. So the only way to punish these sanctuary cities is to take away their funding. I think it's almost like a legal question here. You don't like the federal law, then change the federal law. Otherwise, you have to adapt and respect it.
John?
Jonah's point is ridiculous. We're going to let illegals have a sanctuary because they are illegals and less likely to commit violent crimes and Americans are more so. There's a reason we treat Americans different in this country. There's a reason that we shouldn't have a sanctuary city for illegals who have created who are felons as well.
We have federal gun laws, and criminals still go to Virginia because it's easier to buy a gun than in New York, and some of them do crimes, but not all of them.
It's legal there. It's legal to buy a gun there.
That's my point. You can tie crimes to a state that has loose laws on guns. It doesn't mean the federal government should step in and make the gun laws restrictive in every state necessarily, just because some people are breaking
But Virginia isn't breaking any laws.
Okay, I'm sorry, guys. We got to go. And I can't imagine Jonah speeding much in Georgia. Okay.
I make Virginia get my guns.
Thanks, guys. Cashing in just